He once ruled the screen like a king from Broadway to Hollywood. Yul Brynner did not need many lines. Just a look, a pose, and the whole audience seemed to be silent. But behind that halo was a very different person, mysterious, lonely, and carrying many unspeakable wounds. The man who once lived in a luxurious villa in the middle of Vladivostok is now mentioned through an abandoned house, covered in moss. A life that went through 4 marriages, estranged children, a quiet death, and a fortune that no one properly kept. You used to know him through his roles. But the rest of his life was almost forgotten by the world. If you believe that every person deserves to be fully heard, subscribe to the channel. Because there are memories, only live on when there are people to tell them. Anyone who grew up with the king and I remembers the image of that bald man, Yul Brynner, with his cold gaze and his deep voice like burnt wood. But on October 10, 1985, the stage lights closed forever. He died at New York Hospital, at the age of 65, after a period of fighting lung cancer. His death was not just the departure of a star but the end of an era. An era where stage and screen intersected, marked by a strong, masculine, and authoritative image. But even as he was about to leave the world, Brynner did not want to leave behind just a role. He left a warning not to his fans, but to anyone who had ever held a cigarette to his lips. In the last months of his life, he did not remain silent. On the contrary, he chose to face the disease that was gnawing at him and turned his own death into a message for the community. Yul collaborated with the American Cancer Society to record a short clip after his interview with Good Morning America. It was not a role. It was a last word. In the 30-second clip, Yul looked straight into the camera. His eyes were sunken, his face was gaunt, his voice was firm but not angry. He said, "Now that I'm gone, I just want to say this: don't smoke. Whatever you do, don't smoke. If I could go back and eliminate that habit, we wouldn't have to talk about cancer. I'm sure of it." A few days after his death, the clip was broadcast nationwide, and quickly spread internationally. It didn't sound like an advertisement but a sentiment, a real face, a final whisper from someone who was losing his breath. It made people unable to look away. Because now, the risk of cigarettes is no longer a dry number on a package. It has a face. It has a voice. It has a story, and it is a story that ends too soon. A small but strange detail in a broadcast version: his birth year was incorrectly recorded as 1915, instead of the correct 1920. For others, it was a mistake. But for Brynner, who happily added legendary anecdotes to his life, perhaps it was just a way to keep a bit of artistic mist until the last minute. After his death, his body was cremated. There was no splendid monument, no farewell medal. Yul Brynner's ashes were placed in the Abbey of Saint-Michel-de-Bois-Aubry, near Luz, in the peaceful French countryside. An ancient abbey, nestled in the middle of a deserted field, where only the bells and the wind could be heard. That peaceful, quiet scene reflected the man himself, a wandering soul, living among art, philosophy and the desire to overcome fate. No matter how many roles he played, perhaps deep inside he was still a man always searching for himself. And when that journey ended, he did not leave behind a monument. He left behind a saying. And sometimes that alone is enough to change someone's life. There are houses built not only of bricks and stones but of memories. On Alutskaya Street, in the middle of the cold city of Vladivostok, there is still an old villa, the facade darkened by time, the wooden windows half closed as if sleeping in the middle of the crowded street. The house where Yul Brynner was born. People can easily pass by without knowing. There is no large sign, no light to remind them. Only a small stone stele and a bust of him as King Mongkut stand there, silently as if waiting for someone to come back and continue the story. Back then, this was one of the most luxurious villas in Vladivostok belonging to the Brynner family, successful merchants of Swiss origin. But after the Russian Revolution, everything was confiscated. The family left in silence, like many people who lost their homeland. And that house that was once filled with laughter, once filled with childhood sunshine, has now become the office of a shipping company, no longer a home, nor a museum. Have you ever returned to the place where you were born after many decades? And if you did, what would be left of that place? For Yul Brynner, that house no longer belongs to him. And no one is waiting for him to return. Once, a local standing silently in front of the building said, "We are proud that you were born here, but this place never knew how to keep you." As for assets, Yul left a rather modest legacy for a star of his stature: an apartment in Manhattan, a small farm in France, a collection of books, a few works of art and shares of Hard Rock Cafe. All were divided equally among his children and his last wife. There is no monument, no charity named after him. Not a single house with a "National Monument" sign. There is only that old villa where time has no more footsteps of relatives. And strangers sometimes pass by, take a photo, then forget his name when leaving. For a man who lived his whole life on stage, perhaps what he left behind is not in real estate or funds, but in the silence behind the lights, where people still remember a look, a voice, and a house that used to be his but is now only a memory. Yul Brynner was not born into the limelight. He was born in the midst of a historical storm, on July 11, 1920, in the port city of Vladivostok, on the eastern edge of Russia. His father was Julius Brynner, a Swiss-Russian merchant who made his fortune trading silver and timber in the Far East. His mother, Marusia Blagodarov, came from a Russian intellectual family, with Buryat blood and a deep love of art. Young Yul grew up in a luxurious villa on Alutskaya Street, with its curved balconies, stained glass windows, and quiet afternoon teas. But history soon changed. When the Red Army captured Vladivostok in 1922, the family lost everything. His parents divorced, and the 2-year-old boy left his homeland with his mother and sister in silence, never to return. They wandered through Harbin, then Paris, living in small apartments, making a living performing folk music and street circuses. Yul learned to play the guitar from his sister Vera, learned French and English from old books, and learned how to stand on stage from vaudeville shows. He understood very early that he could not rely on anyone, and if he wanted to stand up, he had to learn to control the gaze of others. In 1940, Yul and his mother moved to New York. When he set foot on American soil, he brought nothing but a distinct deep voice, an unmistakable appearance, and an irreplaceable willpower. He worked as an announcer for Voice of America, then studied acting with Michael Chekhov, and soon stepped onto the Broadway stage. It was here that a legend began to take shape. But behind the calm on stage was a man who always yearned for the simplest thing, a family to belong to. Yul Brynner had 4 wives, each entering his life at very different times. Virginia Gilmore was the first. They married in 1944, when they were both young and not yet famous. They had a son, Yul Rock Brynner Jr., born in 1946. Rock grew up on his father's tours and once said that, at times, he learned more about his father from the newspapers than from family dinners. Still, Rock remained respectful of his absent father and later became a writer and historian, preserving the remnants of his memory. His second wife, Doris Kleiner, was a Chilean-born model. They had a daughter, Victoria Brynner, born in 1962. She grew up in the world of art and fashion and later became a quiet but courageous guardian of her father's legacy. Then there was Jacqueline de Lachaume, an elegant French lady. They had no biological children, but together they adopted 2 Vietnamese girls, Mia and Melody, in the final years of the Indochina War. No one knew much about that decision. He did not speak out. He just quietly brought the 2 children into his private life, as a humanitarian act, without explanation. His last wife was Kathy Lee, a young Malaysian dancer, who came to him when he was already weak from illness. They married in 1983, just 2 years before he died. But it was she who was by his side in his final days, holding his hand through every pain, without fuss, without conditions, just love. In addition, he also had an illegitimate daughter, Lark Brynner, born in 1958 from a relationship with actress Frances Martin. Lark lived a private life, but was still mentioned by the family as an indispensable part. Yul Brynner's family is not a perfect story. It is a collection of fragments, held together by effort and genuine affection. Despite their distance, his children Rock, Victoria, Mia, Melody, Lark all carry the shadow of a special father. Not always present, not always gentle, but the influence is undeniable. An artist is not easy to love. A father is not easy to understand. But in each child he leaves behind, a part of his heart lives on. Not a model father. Not an ideal husband. But a real, complex man who loved, lost, and left something in the hearts of those who passed through his life. For Yul Brynner, the stage was not a place to seek the limelight but a place to return to oneself. He started out like many other immigrants in America, alien, poor, and not yet fluent in English. In the early 1940s, he worked as a radio announcer for Voice of America, then studied acting with Michael Chekhov, the grandson of the great writer Anton Chekhov. But no one could have expected that this Asian man with a bald head and a thick voice would soon become one of the irreplaceable cinematic icons of the 20th century. The turning point came in 1951, when he took on the role of King Mongkut in the musical The King and I on Broadway. With his majestic stance, strong bare feet, and cold yet human eyes, he not only played the king, he became the king. That role became legendary. No one else could replace him in that role. Yul Brynner played the role more than 4,600 times throughout his life, from Broadway to national tours. And when the film adaptation was released in 1956, he won the Oscar for Best Actor, etching his image into the memories of many generations of audiences. But he did not let himself be confined to one role. From the King of Siam, he transformed into diverse characters, the proud pharaoh in the Ten Commandments, the cold lover in Anastasia, the brave cowboy in the Magnificent Seven, and especially the robot killer in Westworld, a role ahead of its time in artificial intelligence. In each role, Yul Brynner did not need many lines. Just his eyes, his posture, and his presence. He did not act in a flamboyant way. He existed on the screen, and just that, the audience could not take their eyes off. In addition to acting, he was a photographer, an author, a relentless storyteller. He took backstage photos of Broadway with a Leica, wrote books about life on stage, and was a UNICEF Goodwill ambassador, quietly dedicating himself to causes beyond the spotlight. To many, Yul Brynner was just the famous bald man. But to those who saw him perform, who heard his voice ring out from the stage, he was no longer a star, he was an icon. You may forget many films, but if you saw him on stage, you will never forget him. When Yul Brynner left this world on October 10, 1985, people lost more than just an actor. They lost a part of their memory. No one can replace him on stage. No one can recreate that look, that posture, that silence that weighed so much. But what he left behind was not only in the roles that were replayed on television every weekend. It was also in the values of life that he silently conveyed. Yul Brynner lived the way he acted decisively, without embellishment, without explanation. He did not chase after the limelight, nor did he cling to fame. When the time came, he quietly walked into the sunset, like an artist who knew when to leave the stage. And it was in the last months of his life, when his body could no longer withstand lung cancer, that Yul left a message that left the whole world speechless. He looked straight into the camera, no background music, no special effects, just the truth: I'm gone now. I just want to say this: don't smoke. No preaching. No threats. Just a man who has been through it all, and left a saying for those who still have time to change. That's not an advertisement. That's a last word, and also the most humane legacy he left. Today, people can forget the names of the movies, forget the awards, but people still remember those words, those eyes, that sincerity. Because when everything else disappears, what remains is not the reputation but the real person behind. Yul Brynner was once a king on stage. But in real life, he just wanted to be a good man, a remembered father, a loved husband, a person not forgotten. And though the house where he was born is now old, and though his legacy is no monument, what he did leave behind is a gentle reminder of life, of choice, and of the value of a life truly lived. There are faces that when appearing on the screen not only make us look up, but also stay in our memory for a long time, as if they had entered our lives very naturally. Yul Brynner is such a person. No need to say much, no need to show off. He just needs to stand still, look straight at the audience, and people automatically feel something, a sadness, a nostalgia, or a part of their youth. Maybe you have seen him on a quiet evening with your family, maybe it was just a fleeting image on an old screen, but that feeling is still somewhere in you. What do you think about Yul Brynner? Leave your comments below. Hope you find this video useful. Don't forget to leave a like, share and subscribe to the channel if you like it. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.